the voice. Yes? No?
Go ahead.
Yeah? Yeah. Okay, you're getting it. All right, here we go. Let's start this recorder. All right, we are going to do nothing tonight. Everything that we're going to do is a repeat of the last two classes we did. And I'm doing it for the simple reason that it's so easy to forget and not keep up with this. And I am concerned at this point because for years and years and years, I've worked on developing this estimation system, and nobody uses it. I don't even know if anybody has ever tried using it. And I get such really nice, detailed information out of it. And it's very, very helpful for understandings that you can't get other ways. But nobody seems to be wanting to use it, and so this will be a last-ditch chance that I'm going to offer the information and hope that people are interested enough to want to use it. Now, this packet that I gave you here, it's for photocopying. There's only 2 horoscopes in it, and those are the ones we've been working on. But it's for photocopying so that when you want to use it on other horoscopes that you work with, you can do that. So let's quickly do a review of what we're trying to get at. All right, in your packet, you have a profile index. And the profile index is for giving you a lot of the distance views of things. The attitude tests and profiles are for understanding things relative to the signs. You want to understand how many foci are in which different kinds of signs, and that gives you an outlook on the attitudes. The opportunity profiles are the same thing, only for the houses. And with the houses, you have three more tests and profiles for telling more broad things that are useful and helpful. The part that we're interested in this series of talks is the part about the action. The action in a horoscope is determined by the aspects. And we're saying, and we've said all along, that the aspects are the most important part in applied astrology. You can tell the things that are most important, most relevant, and most determine the nature, the character, and the abilities, the talents that they have, or negative talents that they have, or whatsoever. And so what we're going to try and do is we are going to try to get to filling out and using the action section of the profile index for 2 horoscopes, the horoscope of Margaret Thatcher and the horoscope of Woody Allen. The focus tests and profiles at the end are for the very large overall part of it. We won't be doing anything with that. If you look on the back of the profile index, on the back, everything's explained how you do it and what you can get out of it. Really simple. All you need is one line for each one, and then you understand what you're doing. All right, now. In order to get to normally you do the profiles first, but since one of the profiles deals with how many planets are there with how many aspects are intense, how many of them are medium, and how many of them are weak, it's probably a good idea to work with the aspect strengths first. And with that, it's the next thing in the handout, which is the aspect worksheet. And using the aspect worksheet, you can take each of the aspects, and it's an estimation system or an approximation system, and taking into all the things that come into account in the strength of an aspect, you can get a rough approximation of how strong each aspect is. And when you know how strong each aspect is, if you have two aspects playing on a common planet, then you can understand what that means for the person, which is more likely, suppose there's a negative aspect to a planet and a positive aspect to the planet, which one is more likely to win out? Is a person more likely to have a bad temper, or they're more likely to deflect their temper into hard work or something like that? That is what the purpose of the aspect worksheet is all about. And the aspect worksheet is used to determine the relative strength of each of the planets. And we'll be coming up to that chart in just a little bit. And if you know the relative strength of each of the planets and you know the strength of the aspect, then you have an overall picture of planet aspect functionality in a horoscope, and from that you can tell a great deal. All right, there's a short form and a long form. If you notice after column 4, there is a dark line there that's darker than all of the other verticals. That's the short form. If you just do 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then transfer everything over to 10, then you don't have to go through all of the work. Again, it takes only a line or two to say what each of the columns on the aspect worksheet is all about. Very simple, so that all you have to do is know some of the very basics of astrology, and you can come up with the information that you're looking for. All right? Now, you don't even have to be an expert in estimating the strength of things. All you have to do is trust me, just like a con man. Huh? All you have to do is trust me. And you have tables, and these tables are made out. They're after very much years worth of experience. If you have applying aspect, and so suppose the applying aspect is at 3 degrees and 30 minutes, you would look right here. My laser pointer hasn't come in. The first one evaporated on me. I don't know where it went. But you would use approximation number for applying aspect with an orb of 3 degrees and 30 minutes is 44. And that is how you enter things into the approximation column in the aspect worksheet. I'm going through this rather quickly because I'm sure that everybody's familiar with this already, and they've sat through several classes of this. Whether they've applied it or not is another thing. This is for a separating aspect. If you have a separating aspect of 3 degrees and 30 minutes, you have an approximation number of 38. You're saying that the intensity of an aspect decreases rapidly during separation because once the high point has been reached, everything tapers off very quickly. If you like, I don't have it in your handout, but if you like and you don't like using those tables, this is if you want to approximate according to a curve. you end up with the same results. It's just that you look at a curve. And you can see that things rise rather steeply on the build-up side, and then they fall off on the separation. All right. Most people are not graph readers. Now you have to be able to tell what is application and separation. So you have this sheet that tells you what is when a planet is applying to an aspect, when it is separating, and when it is in culmination, which is called partile. Again, as you look at each aspect, you can see for yourself. If the moon is going to be opposite the sun, this is when it's applying. When it is exactly opposite, then it separates. The same thing for each of the other basic aspects that we use, the conjunction, the sextile, the square, the trine, and the opposition. So these are all fairly simple things. Then there are cycles. And this is an explanation for people who, it's a concept that some people have a very hard time grasping. It's really a simple concept. And that is, when is something in first phase and when is something in last phase. Everything from the conjunction, from the conjunction to the opposition, when the faster moving planet is forward in the zodiac from the slower moving planet is called first phase. And then when from the opposition back to the conjunction is called second phase. And each of the two phases has a different quality to it. All right.
When the faster moving planet is doing what?
When the faster moving planet is forward in the zodiac from the closest distance, from the faster to the slower, from the slower to the faster is the shortest distance is forward in the zodiac, it's first phase. You see what I'm trying to say here? Here is the conjunction. This, if you take the first sextile, which is here, the forward movement, forward from the sun to the moon, the shortest distance is forward in the zodiac. You can go backward in the zodiac and go all the way around and come, but the shortest distance is forward in the zodiac, so that's first phase. After the opposition, then the shortest distance from the slower to the faster is backward in the zodiac. All right. These are the last thing that you have in your packet is a very brief synopsis of what each of the tests and profiles means. Like,
Size 12, doesn't it?
what's that?
Footprint looks like about size 12, doesn't it?
Oh, yes. I didn't notice that. All right. Now, that's the packet that's everything that you need to do what we're doing. All right, now let's pass out the...
Richard, clarification since I came in late. I remember last year we were only working with one section on the profile.
Yes.
Is that what we're doing?
Yes, we're only working with the activity. All right.
The action.
All right. Now what we did, the next handout is for Margaret Thatcher. This is a review of everything we've done in the past, and this is the Margaret Thatcher part. Unfortunately, some of these didn't print really clearly, but let's take this one of Margaret Thatcher is reasonably clear. This is her horoscope. And if you note, in the lower right corner is a table of the aspects and the distances between them. And that is very, very helpful. It takes away having to do all the arithmetic that I tend to do anyway, because I want to make sure it's accurate. And so, all right, that's the Margaret Thatcher horoscope. This is the worksheet. Now, let's take some time and work with this one. The first thing you do in column 1 is you list all of the aspects. Then, I have a programmable calculator, which is very, very handy. The next column, column 2, is the distance between the planets. Like from the Sun to Pluto is 94 degrees and 45 minutes. Then if you take the orb of the aspect, that is what you get in the third column. It is 4 degrees and, was that 43 or 45? I can't. 45 minutes. All right, and what you do is with each of them, you write the planets down, you write the distance from the planets, and then the orb from the exact aspect. Like the Sun sextile Neptune would be 60 degrees, but this is 4 degrees and 44 minutes before the exact sextile. Now, if you look in column 3, there are underneath each orb, there is an S or an A. And the S means separating, the A means applying. If you look to the right on the lower level of the entries on column 3, there is either a first, an F, or an L. And that means it's either first phase or last phase. So this is why we are doing this part first. And then all you do, like the first one, is a separation. So we would go back to the separation tables and look at 445 separating, and that's where you get the approximation number. You get 24. And so you can see this is how column 4 is the short form. If you want to stop right there, you can stop right there and then carry all of the entries over to column 10. All right, let's do the long form. The focus bias, if you look on the back of your sheet, of one of the planet aspect sheets, it tells you what that is. That is whether the planets like the aspect or not. Like, for example, if you take Sun conjoined Mercury, we give it about 3 points extra because Mercury loves the conjunction. And thus and so you go all the way through. Reception is column 6. If one planet is in the other planet's other planet's sign, that is a partial reception. If they're both in each other's sign, that is a neutral reception. If one planet is in the detriment of the other planet, then that is an anti-reception. And if both planets are in each other's detriment, that is in a double, or a major anti-reception. All right. So we see that in the case of Margaret Thatcher, with the Sun sextile Neptune, Neptune is in, the Sun is in its, Neptune is in Leo. And Leo is the sun's dignity. And for that, 5 extra points get added on. These are things that, this is a quantification of things that go back hundreds of years. In the case of Saturn and Jupiter, Jupiter is in Saturn's dignity. It's in Capricorn, so that increases the strength a little bit more. It makes the flavor of the aspect a little bit stronger. Does everybody see what we're doing? Okay.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Which would it make stronger, Jupiter or Saturn?
It's the aspect. We're only dealing with aspects here. We'll do the same thing with planets coming up in a little bit. All right? If you look at mutual agreement, how the two planets like or dislike each other. This is a very subjective judgment. The Sun and Pluto are both power planets, so they like each other. The Sun and Neptune, Neptune is diffusive and the Sun is more centering, and so they don't like each other, so you take off a couple points. Sun and Jupiter, they're both very positive planets, and so there is increase of strength. The strongest increase that we have is Mercury and Neptune, and Mercury and Neptune are that way because they are planetary octaves with each other. And the same thing with Mars and Pluto. They're both planetary octaves and of each other, and that adds the strength. The liking of the Moon and Neptune for each other in an aspect is because they're both highly imaginative. And the same thing with the following aspect, the square between Venus and the Moon. They're both very feminine planets. In fact, if you wanted to, you could even throw a little more into that one and give it a +4 if you like. All right, but you see what we're doing here. We're adding little bitty factors to each. Then the aspect agreement is whether the planets like this kind of aspect. Pluto happens to like squares. Neptune happens to like sextiles. Neither the Sun nor Jupiter like squares, so it's a minor takeaway. Both the Sun and Mercury like conjunctions, so there's a strengthening there.
How is that different from focus bias?
What?
How is aspect agreement different from focus bias?
I can't give you that right off the top of my head right now, but it's on the back of the sheet that'll tell you.
Okay.
The last column that you put together is the collection of light. And that is if two planets are in aspect and they both are in aspect to a third planet, and that third planet is between their degrees, it increases. All right, now we have the Sun is the Moon is sextile to Mercury. And is that so? Yes, Moon sextile Mercury. And between them, what is the third aspect that they all make here? Let me see if we can find that quickly. Oh, they both aspect Neptune. No, that's not it. That's not what we're looking for.
They do both aspect.
Yes. Yes, but there's not a collection there. That may be, Mercury and Neptune aspect each other, and the Moon is, Neptune is between the orb of Mercury, which is 23, and the Moon, which is 28. So it's in between 23 and 28, so that aspect of Moon and Mercury, since they both add, the effect of Neptune being in between adds on to the strength. And the same thing is with Saturn and Pluto. Saturn trines Pluto, and who trines Saturn? Jupiter, Pluto, yeah. the planet they have in common is Jupiter. And Jupiter's at 1429. Saturn is at 1346, and Pluto is at 1445. So right smack in between Saturn and Pluto is where you find Jupiter, and that pulls it together a little bit stronger. And since the orbs are very close here, I gave it a +3. All right, now, everybody sees what we've done here. Yes?
Not exactly, because are you just saying that because of the degrees?
That
Because otherwise
they're trying.
Saturn would fall in between.
No. Jupiter falls in between. You go from, if you're going from the least to the greatest, Saturn is 1346. If you go up, the next one is 1429, and then the last one, which is Pluto, is 1445. So Jupiter is in between, in degree sequence between,
Degree
and Pluto.
sequence versus sign sequence.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right. But they'll have to all aspect each other.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you add them all up, and what you come up with is, in column 10, you come up with a total. And you can see most of the planets don't vary very much at all from what the original estimation was. They're all probably within 3 points of what the original estimation was. So you might be, you're straining at a gnat when you're doing all those points. Sometimes it makes a difference. And then what you do at the end is you reorganize them according to their totals. And this says that the strongest aspect in the chart is Jupiter opposite Pluto. The next strongest aspect is equally divided. They're about the same strength. Saturn trine Pluto and Mercury sextile Neptune are about the same strength. And then the fourth strongest is the Jupiter sextile Saturn, which is at 84 points. Then there's a big fall off. And then the moon square Venus is way down at 44. And so this is just a reorganization from the strongest aspect down to the weakest aspect. Then you add everything up, and because the estimation or approximation numbers are arbitrary numbers, and they really don't have any meaning. You can't compare them from one chart to another because it doesn't work, because the arbitrariety of it is such that it's not on a common scale. But what you want to do is you want to understand the percentage. So if you take the total and you see how many percent of the total is the Jupiter opposite Pluto, and that turns out to be 16%. These are rough. The percentages are rough. If you add them all up, they add up to 102%. You can't be 102%. It's because of rounding factors, and I didn't want to go into writing decimal fractions of percentages and things like that. So that says that the top aspect is clearly the strongest, and the next three are very close to each other, and then they drop off. Now let's take an example of something here.
Can I ask, how did you get the percentage?
I took the 97 and I divided by 622, which is the total. And that gives you the 16%. Now let's just take the top and bottom aspects. They're both Jupiter aspects. Sun is square Jupiter, and Jupiter is opposite Pluto. Now suppose Jupiter is aspected. It's 4 times more likely, when you use the percentages, it's 4 times more likely that the person is going to respond to a Jupiterian situation with the Pluto opposite Jupiter than it is with the Jupiter square the Sun. Now if you try to put that in human terms, Jupiter opposite Pluto is a person who is an opposition, has an opposition prejudice. This is somebody that has a prejudice that is strengthened by being opposed to something. Whereas the Sun square Jupiter is a likelihood to overconfidence. So given a Jupiterian situation, suppose Jupiter gets activated by, I don't know, something like the Sun passing over Jupiter, the person is much more likely to act with a negative prejudice than they are with over-optimism. This gives you a likelihood of the way a person is going to act one way or another. And when we come to the next part, further on down the line, we'll become even more pinpoint on all of this. But you see what we're trying to get to. This is very, very valuable. I have a horoscope that Alan Leo had collected all kinds of really great horoscopes. The horoscope of a man who twice was almost run over by an automobile. But in both cases, the automobile stopped inches from his head. So clearly there's one aspect that indicates the likelihood to an accident, and another aspect that indicates being preserved from danger or being preserved from harm. All right, you can see, and it's important to know which is stronger. If the latter had been strong, if the former had been stronger, the head would have been squashed. All right. You understand what we're doing. All right. Now, from this, we go back and do the profile index. We had 13 aspects, and that's moderate activity, maybe a little moderate low. And now that we have done the estimation of the aspect strength, it's very simple to pick out how many are of high, how many of are medium, and how many are of low. And that's just what we noted. We noted that the 4 aspects at the top were very strong, and there were a couple of middling aspects, but everything at the bottom is faint. So we have somebody who, in terms of action, is somebody has 4 tools that they really use a lot and that are quite strong, and most everything else is pretty weak. Benefic, malefic, and variable. There are 5 benefic aspects, 6 malefic aspects, and 2 that are variable. You can even throw the variables into one category or the other if you want. You can do that reasonably. But this says that, this is a person that's balanced. There are some other actions are likely to be positive, some are likely to be negative. It's fairly balanced all the way. All right, and using the chart that we had, we determined whether they were applying or separating or first and last. And we see that there's pretty much a balance in terms of applying. So there's a slightly building tension or a slightly building aspect energy in life, but it's not really a standout. But this is somebody who is, when you get at the last test, the phase test, 9 of the 13 aspects are first phase. So this is somebody who definitely wants to be a builder. All right, you see what we've all done. All right. And I'm probably the only one that's going to do it, because now it's embarrassment time. The next thing is, over the summer, your homework was to do the same thing for the Woody Allen charts. And now you're going to see whether your work agrees with mine. All right.
Hey, quick question. Did the effective aspects, along with the rest of the chart, wane with the age of the person?
Yes. Everything wanes with the age of the person. For the last 5 years, I have undergone all kinds of really things that would have knocked me off my feet when I was younger, and nothing. Just last weekend, I should have gotten married, and nobody showed up at at my doorstep. I didn't even have thoughts about my ex-wife. The last the last full moon, which was last Saturday or Sunday morning, was 3 minutes away from being right on my moon. 3 minutes, nothing happened. I didn't have any special imagination things. Not, it was not marked altogether. Either, the conclusion I've come to is that I have basically become how old and insensitive, and I'm something now like a piece of furniture in terms of astrological effect. All right, we had now the chart of Woody Allen. Unfortunately, the ones that I have that I passed out, the printing didn't work out well. We're going to do the same thing with Woody Allen. All right. See, I got to get a projector that works with a computer. All right. Woody Allen has less aspects than Margaret Thatcher. And in the first column, we just put them all down. And fairly simple. And the next one, we again add up the totals. The sun is 84 degrees and 58 minutes away from Saturn. And it's 3 degrees and 56 minutes away from Jupiter and 4 degrees and 32 minutes away from Mercury. And so you do all of those things, and then you determine whether they're applying or separating. You've got a little chart so that you can see how to do that now. And we see then that the orb of the square of Saturn and the sun is 5 degrees and 2 minutes, but it's separating. The sun is pulling away from the square. And it is a last square in that the shortest distance from Saturn to the sun is backwards in the zodiac. We can see that. The sun is in Sagittarius, and Saturn is in Pisces, and to get from the slower planet to the faster planet, you go backwards in the zodiac for approximately 90 degrees. And so on down the line. It's fairly simple. Then you use either your applying approximations or your separating approximations, and you get the short list of evaluations. And then you do the same kinds of things again. There's nothing really stand out in here. The sun in Jupiter has all kinds of build-up there. It gains 15 points. That's unusual. That's very, very unusual to find something like that. The Mercury in Jupiter also, because Jupiter is in its own sign, the other planet is in reception to it, and so that's why that kind of a buildup occurs like that. All right, I don't have all of my reasoning on my fingertips here because I was busy all week making all these charts and diagrams, and so you end up with the adjusted totals in column 10, and then you go from the highest to the lowest, and that is Saturn square Mercury. Clearly the mode of consciousness of Woody Allen. No doubt about it. He's a pessimist. He even talks with that mental pessimistic attitude. And if Mercury square Jupiter doesn't indicate neurosis, I don't know what does.
Saturn.
What? Saturn and Mercury, yeah. I'm sorry, that's clearly neurotic. So, you know, he's honest about the fact that he's neurotic. He isn't lying to himself about it. But you see,
He's made a career out of it.
yeah, you see that the next aspect, the next three aspects are all just about equal with each other. When you get over to the percentages, you see that. He does get along well with women, sometimes too well, and so that you see it all. Now, the thing to notice in here in terms of activity is that things taper more. You don't have that fall off like you had with the Margaret Thatcher. She's got the big four aspects, which we're going to go into next time. We're going to look at them and draw some real material out of this. But in this case, it's a gradual taper all the way down the line. All right.
He has that old neurotic stuff at the mother.
What?
You know how he's always putting it about the overbearing mother.
Yeah, but he's sort of an old womanish person himself, and I'd say that that's he loves to fuss over things, and that's Moon Venus. He fusses over them, and he's got really good taste musically, excellent taste musically. All right.
You know, I came up with the same results, except the dog ate my homework.
There is a cartoon. You can find it on the internet. The daily cartoon out of the newspaper that's called the Piranha Club. And it's this club that's always trying to hustle money one way or another. And they cheat each other. And Sid is the treasurer, and they're having the monthly meeting, and they want the treasurer's report. And he says, the dog ate the treasurer's report. And and they all get angry, and they say, dogs don't eat paper. And Sid says, if you put enough gravy on them, they do.
If it's any
Great stuff. All right. And then we use that to, this was the other part of your assignment for the homework, to do the activity profiles for Woody Allen. Middle of the road, perhaps a little low, someone that wants to avoid extremes, and that's certainly him. In the intensity, he's either hot about something or cold about it altogether in terms of his actions. And he has many more problematic conditions than pleasant. So he's a flawed personality, and he would say that himself. Oh, there's a typo in there. Or is that really a typo? Yes, there is. And personality, I got an extra letter in there. And so he's a flawed personality. He's got more problems. Doesn't mean he can't be successful. If we go back and look, if we go back and look at it, we see that, yes, he's a neurotic, but he's a good artist. And he can parlay the success of his art to deal with all of the flawed conditions. All right.
I saw a documentary on him that he approved and was
Yeah.
interested in. And he's very methodical in terms of schedule and compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
Is that the activity? Or
That's Saturn and Mercury. That's a very, everything has to be precisely on time.
Richard, I missed an important piece of information. Where I understand the activity line, but where do all the other numbers come from?
Where all the other numbers.
The intensity and the quality of the upper.
That's what you were supposed to fill out. You have in your back of your profile index, it tells you what you're supposed to do. From the thing that we just did before this, we saw how many are high intensity aspects, how many are low, and how many are middle. The boundaries for that are on the back side of the profile index. And the others, the benefic, malefic, and variable, the trines and sextiles are considered benefic, the squares and oppositions are considered malefic, and the variables. Now you could go into detail on this, and you can see which are the strong ones. And if you look at the chart, the benefic, malefic, you see that 3 of the top 4 aspects are malefic. So when he has flaws or when he has bad habits, they're really bad. They're deeply ingrained. Applying separation it's slightly relaxing, easing off of tensions. Is he more at ease with himself as life goes on? Probably. It's not enough to be dramatic. Again, the last phase, he's definitely somebody who's taking things apart and analyzes them. He makes movies, yes, he's a creator in that sense, but in his movies, he's analyzing situations. I haven't seen any of the recent ones. All right, now we'll do what we're doing for tonight. Huh?
The recent one was Blue Jasmine.
Yeah, I haven't seen one. Don't go much to
It's a
one.
good study of people treating each other poorly.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the situation. Yeah.
What I thought would be interesting when you look at the personality of Woody Allen and the personality of Mr. Gates from Microsoft, I think there's a
Similarity.
huh?
Similarity.
Similarity there.
All right. This is what we're looking at tonight. This is a planetary worksheet. This is for Margaret Thatcher. This draws on what we have just completed. If you look at column 14, see all of these sheets flow one onto the other. If you look at column 14, that's all of the aspects that the sun is in, and then underneath them are the strengths of them, and you add them all up. Again, that's the short form. Venus makes only one aspect, and that's 47. Thus and so. There are a couple of anomalies in here. Uranus makes no aspects. And that's one of the weaknesses of the approximation system. It doesn't allow for an unaspected planet. Because a planet certainly is going to have influence of some amount, but without an aspect, you don't have a toehold that you can understand how much influence it does have. So that is all just a question. All right, now you can see what we've done at column 14. All right, column 15 and column 16 are from on the opposite side of the sheet. And here we go. What we're doing here is we're doing like a complete history of astrology. All of the things that are factors in determining the strength of a planet are in the making of this chart.
We don't have this in our Margaret Thatcher, actually.
We have Margaret Thatcher, but not Woody Allen.
We don't have the sheet.
Oh, I didn't pass him out. Sorry. Let me have one also. Sorry. Thank you.
So does this sheet get added to the other full set?
Yes.
Right. How's Virgo here?
All right. Does anybody have the first basic handout, the thick one? Is there an extra?
But here, this one,
You need one?
Yeah,
The
for
whole
now.
one.
Yeah.
this has.
All right. If you look on your big handout, on the back side, it tells you what all of the columns A through K and AA through HH represent. The A is, I got one.
Oh.
The A is for the ruler of the ascendant. And you can give up to 60 points. And what we're saying is that if a planet rules the ascendant, it's a pretty strong aspect, or a halfway aspect. If the aspects go from 0 to 100 in the estimation chart, that just ruling the ascendant is halfway. And since she has Scorpio rising, I gave 50 points to both Mars and Pluto, who are the co-rulers. The up to 12 degrees is whether a planet is angular or not. And in the Margaret Thatcher chart, let's look at all the angular planets. Ooh, that's Woody Allen. Well, that's William Blake. That's Woody Allen. I thought I had set her stuff aside. I guess I hadn't. So this one has to be a Margaret Thatcher. Yes. All right. And column B, there is for Margaret Thatcher 10 points for Venus, because Venus is in the first house, and that's usually the strongest angular house. The Moon and Saturn are in cadent houses. Saturn is in the 12th house, and the Moon is in the 9th house, and that weakens. And Uranus is in the 4th house, and so it gets extra perks for that. Column 3 is elevation. This is a tough one. You can see that the Moon in Uranus, the Moon is roughly conjoined the midheaven, so the Moon and Neptune both get quite a bit for elevation. Mars gets something for elevation because it's the next highest, and Pluto gets something for elevation. It's about the same number of degrees away from the midheaven as Mars is. All the other planets, they get some, but not very much. The Sun and Mercury are elevated. I wouldn't count anything in the 12th house in terms of elevation.
Are you figuring elevation from the mid-heaven?
Yeah. The highest elevation would be if something was exactly at the midheaven. And the negative would be if it were exactly at the nadir. And Uranus in this case is down in the 4th house, and so it loses 5 points, and Jupiter loses 3 points. In the history of astrology, the negatives of being beneath the earth are not as strong as the positives of being elevated above the earth. At least that's what I draw from reading books from the history of astrology. If there's agreement or disagreement with the house that the planet is in, you add or subtract. The Sun is in the 11th house, and the 11th house is the abstract opposite of the Sun's dignity, so it loses some. Venus is in Sagittarius. It loses something because it just doesn't do well in fiery signs. Saturn gains some by, well, let's see here. Oh, Saturn rules destiny, and in the house of destiny it's very strong. Pluto's in the house that it abstractly rules, and it gets 5 points. Intercepted planets, there are no intercepted planets. There is an interception, but there are, whoa, error. The Moon and Neptune are intercepted, so our numbers are going to be wrong. I'll have to give you a corrected version next week. They were so close to the midheaven that I didn't take into account interception. So I would say for the moon and Neptune, maybe something like a -5 or something like that in column E. Column F, planet ruling an intercepted sign, subtract Saturn rules an intercepted sign, so it loses some. The sun. Ooh. Oh, Uranus rules an intercepted sign. There's another error. You got to catch me, boy. There's probably a -4 for the sun also.
Why is Uranus an intersected sign?
Because it rules Aquarius, and Aquarius is intercepted, and it means it doesn't have a toehold. See, this is what we're trying to get at, whether Saturn and Uranus co-rule Aquarius, and they both lose one of the places of influence by not holding a cusp.
So, could you say that again, Uranus is intercepted?
No, Aquarius is intercepted and Leo is intercepted. The co-rulers of Aquarius are Saturn and Uranus. Now, if Aquarius were on a cusp, Saturn and Uranus would have a toe holder. They would be able to deposit planets, but when they lose that cusp, they lose strength in terms of attraction of influencing other planets. All right.
Even though it happens to be in Pisces.
That's correct. Yeah, we're talking only about the relationship of the houses. We're not, the signs are in the bottom table. All right. G. Does everybody know the difference between a depositor and a dispositor?
I would say no.
A depositor is the planet that rules the cusp of a house that another planet is in. In this case, let's take an example. Venus deposits Saturn because Venus rules the cusp of the 12th house where Saturn is in. But the dispositor of Saturn is either Pluto or Mars because they rule Scorpio. They give its disposition is what is in the dispositor, and the depositor is it puts you in the room and locks you in there. Or it holds the key to that. And so what we're looking for at whether a planet agrees or disagrees with its depositor. And Venus is deposited by Jupiter. No, Venus is deposited by Mars, and Mars is its planetary opposite, so it loses strength. The moon is deposited by itself, so it gets a full 4 points. Jupiter is deposited by itself, so it gets a full 4 points. And Neptune is in conjunction with the moon, which is its depositor, so it gets a jolt there. All right, do you see what we've done?
I want to get down the definition.
A depositor is the planet that rules the cusp of a house that another planet is in. The depositor has some control over that house. And if, like Saturn, to some extent, is beholden to Venus in order to be able to function and to express itself house-wise.
So that's the house regardless of what sign the house is.
That's right.
Did you mean Mars is beholden to Venus because Mars rules Scorpio?
Yes. Yes. And Mars is the planetary opposite. All right. We'll come to the dispositors. See, these are important things. If you've ever read the Astrology of Elmenbacher, If you ever read any of his, he's probably, in the 20th century, probably one of the very best astrologers. And he does things all over the place with depositors and dispositors. And it clarifies and opens up situations for you, being able to know what the depositor does and the dispositor does. All right, if we were going into an analysis, we would do that. Number H is 7 points for the depositor of the sun, and that is Venus. Number I is 7 for the depositor of the ruler of the ascendant. The ruler of the ascendant is either Pluto or Mars, and Mars is deposited by Venus, and Pluto is deposited by Mercury because Mercury is on the cusp of the 8th house. Number J, add up to 7 points for the depositor of the most planets, and that is Venus. That's the house that has the most planets in, and overall, even with planets ruling 2 signs, none of them deposits more than 3 planets, so Venus gets another 5 there. So Venus comes up with a pretty high total along with the 2 rulers of the ascendant. And K, the depositor of the largest house, which is the moon and or Saturn, and the depositor of any planet that rules 2 successive cusps, and that's Mars and Venus, rule 2 successive cusps. And that's how we come up with the numbers that get added to the sheet. All right.
So what were the errors we were supposed to keep track of? Column E.
Column E.
Moon and Uranus.
Moon and Neptune.
Oh, Neptune.
Yeah. And
What other column?
what?
What other columns were there missing?
And F, there was an error for the sun.
So -4 there.
Yes.
That was it.
That's it. You have to be very careful. You know, this is something you want to do when you're listening to the radio, for example. You want to be concentrated. All right, now we look at
How is it that the moon is in the largest house?
moon is what?
You said moon was in the largest house.
Yes, it is. Moon rules the largest house. It's in it and it rules it at the same time. Very unusual case. All right, let's move down to the planet sign conditions. Now we're dealing with dispositors, that is, giving dispositions. These are very subjective judgments. The first one, AA, is whether the sun agrees with the sign it is in. It does not. It's fall, so it gets a -7. The moon is in Leo, and the moon does not like Leo at all, so it loses some there. The same thing with Jupiter. Jupiter is in its fall, and so it loses quite a bit. And Mars is in its detriment, and it loses 10. Uranus is in a weak position for it, so it loses. But for the most part, you look for exaggerations and not for minor things. Looking at column BB, add up to 5 points for planets in critical degrees. You can skip that if you want, but the only planet that's in a critical degree is Venus. If you want to know the critical degrees, they are on the big board where you find the little green squares. What the critical degrees are is a carryover from ancient astrology, where they had a lunar zodiac of asterisms, or sometimes called nakshitras, that a lunar zodiac superimposed on a solar zodiac, and the places where if you begin both zodiacs at the first degree of Aries, where the moon travels in one day, at the end of that day, that is a critical degree, 24-hour day. And it's supposed to increase the strength of a planet very little, So you notice I didn't do very much there at all.
So every 12 degrees?
Yes. In the cardinal signs, it's the 1st, 13th, and 26th. In the fixed sign, it's 9 and 21. And in the common sign, it's 4 and 17. All right, CC, the dispositor of the sun. The sun is in Libra, so Venus gets something there. Venus is really cashing in on all of this. The only planet that was. The planet that is the dispositor of the most planets and the dispositor of the ruler of the ascendant. The dispositor of the most planets is Venus. The dispositor of the ruler of the ascendant, you could give some, I didn't do it, you can give some to Mercury if you like, or to Venus if you like, because Venus is a dispositor of Mars as co-ruler of the ascendant. At EE, 5 points for the ruler of the planetary hour at the time of birth, and you have to have tables of planetary houses in order to do that. If you have simplified scientific astrology, again, this person was born in a Venus hour, and the ruler of the planetary day, this person was born on a Tuesday. It says right on our horoscope, Tuesday, March 13th. Only for planetary hours, the day begins at sunrise and not at midnight. And for GG, up to 10 points for a planet being retrograde. Uranus has just barely gone retrograde, so it loses a little there. At HH, this is something that's significant, but it's always hard to judge. This is a female planet. Therefore, the moon gets up to 20 points just because it is the major ruler of all females. And Venus gets up to 10 points because it's the minor female ruler. And you just add up the totals. All right, and that brings us back to where we were. Where were we here?
What's the significance of the day of the birth time?
Each day has a flavor, and it has the flavor of the planetary ruler. Sunday has the quality of the sun. Monday has the quality of the moon, and so on. Is this it here? Yes, we are. No.
Is there a numerical quantification for the phases of the moon?
No, not that I know of. And I'm pretty much of a... All right. Now we take all of those things and we transfer them to the 15 and 16. So you can see that on the planets considerations, we ended up with -7 for the sun, and for the house considerations, we end up with +2 for the sun. So the sun doesn't really change very much. The only planets that really change significantly are Venus and Mars and Pluto. Those are because they are the rulers of the ascendant. And then you add everything up. And then column 17 is everything added up. Now, when you have everything added up, you have to do something. This is a tough one. It's hard to estimate. I've changed views several times in life on this. And that is for the octave planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the amount, they're not the same strength as other planets because we haven't evolved in such a way that we can respond to them. And over the years, I have changed my evaluation of this. So I now rate Uranus at 90%, Neptune at 80, and Pluto at 70, which comes to about, at one time I used to rate Pluto at 50%, but as time has gone on in life, I've increased it so that people are now more responsive, or my observation or understanding is better. So what you end up with is reduced totals for Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now Uranus, as we said, cannot have a negative value. So what you do is you throw in an arbitrary small value for an unaspected planet, or a planet that ends up with negative value. It has to be small so that it doesn't interfere with your percentages of the total strength. And so what I did is I just threw in an arbitrary value of 10 points, which is, compared to all of the other planets, it's just a minimal amount. And then you take the planets and you reorder them from the strongest to the weakest. Now, if you didn't do the adjustment for the octave planets, Pluto would have been the strongest planet, which it could very well be, because Pluto rules reactionaries and extreme conservatives, which she certainly was. In fact, if you look at this, the top 3 planets are heavy hitters in terms of power. The 4 planets that have the most to do with power are the Sun, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. But the Sun is usually personal power, and worldly power comes from the other 3, and those are the top 3 planets. So this is a power player all the way through. So it is likely that either Jupiter or Pluto is the ruler of this chart. This is really a conservative chart. And if you look at this, by far, with that arbitrary number, Uranus is the weakest of all of the planets. And Uranus is the planet of the left. And she wants nothing to do. She gives no quarter to the leftist kind of thinking at all. All right.
So, Richard, this system would supersede the basic principle of if somebody has a rising sign that's afflicted, and the rising sign is Scorpio, so
Not always. It depends. There has to be a clear, strong planet other than the ruler of the ascendant. And in this case, it's ambiguous. With Pluto, it's very close. But yes, if there is if suppose somebody has Gemini rising, but they have a whomping strong Venus that is, head and shoulders above all of the other planets, then Venus would be the life ruler. That this is in agreement with things that go, you can't be religious and say that the ruler of the ascendant is always the ruler of the horoscope. Usually it is, and that's why it is given that extra strong factor when we were doing the considerations, the planet house considerations. Both Mars and Pluto got 50 points because they were planets that ruled the ascendant.
Does Saturn have a big influence on what that ruler is because it's on the ascendant?
I don't take into account aspects to cusps. I don't take into account minor aspects. I don't take into account things other than planets, like asteroids or things like that. You could do that, but it would be an enormously complex system, and I don't have the sensitivity. This is rough. This is rough, but it almost always works. This is a public demonstration. I didn't choose this because for the system. We just did the system on 2 horoscopes that were taken, and it turns out, whammo, it works.
But in a system like horary
In a horary, astrology is altogether different.
Okay.
That's, if you want, I've got recordings of the horary course. Yes, sir.
Um, if the planet that rules the sign and/or the house of the ascendant.
The ascendant or the ruler of the ascendant?
Huh?
The ascendant or the ruler of the ascendant?
Both, I mean, when, plain and simple, if you've got Aries rising,
Yes.
okay?
Mhm.
And you've got Mars that's aspected to the cusp of the ascendant.
Yes.
Does that,
Yes, it does, but I don't put that in the system because it's way, way too complicated, and you have to have a fine-tuned kind of sensitivity or intuition to judge how much strength that has, how much that adds to it. It's something to keep in your mind. Even if you don't use this at all, going through the procedure, you're looking at all of the major factors in a horoscope. Factors that have been in, most of these factors came in from chariot races. In order to get the edge on somebody else, a lot of the major factors in astrology were developed by people betting on chariot races so that they could make more money. But so they go back 2,000 years to Roman times. And so you're looking at all of the things that astrologers have looked at as being important in a horoscope. Fixed stars aren't in it, but you could do that, but then you're adding another layer of complexity that I'm not capable of it.
You ever use the nodes?
What?
You ever use the nodes?
The moon's nodes or all the nodes for all the planets?
The moon's nodes?
Sometimes, yes. But again, usually only in conjunctions and usually only when they're strong. I've read works on the nodes of all the other planets, especially the inner planets, Mercury and Venus. Their nodes do interesting things, very interesting things in horoscopes. And people have made studies where they found problems with children having mental problems and compiled enough horoscopes so that they could see that it had to do with either the north or south node of Mercury in a child's horoscope. And you have to make an ephemeris for the nodes of each of the planets, because the inner planets, they move quite a bit. All right.
But you said it was originally for chariot races?
A lot of the things that are considered in BB, CC, DD, and such were developed by astrologers in those times, yes.
And then one other thing, the percentages for Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, what, you took 90% of 298?
Well, are you talking about that? This again? We added everything all up here, and we ended up with 1324. And you take 221 and divide it by 1324, and that gives you 17%.
No. Like on the Pluto line, see where it says 298?
From 17 to 18.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Then you go to 208.
Yes. That's at 70%.
70%.
208. It tells you right in the back of the sheet.
Oh, okay. And then,
Yeah, 70, 80, and 90.
80 and 90.
Yeah. Good. Your assignment is to do the same thing for the Woody Allen chart, to make out the planetary worksheet and the planet house, planet sign worksheet. And then we'll start doing, because this is a course on the aspects, then we'll start looking at how you use this in the aspects, and there will be at least one more assignment after the one for the next time.
Could you make a computer program to do this?
Yes, but I don't like that because you're not keeping something in mind. When you're looking at who deposits or who disposits who, you're setting that in your mind. But if you're just given a number at the end and you haven't seen where that number has come from, you haven't written it down yourself, it doesn't stick in your mind the right way. Yeah, somebody actually did do a computer program of this at one time. It was done on an old Commodore computer, and I don't think it has anything to, it doesn't translate to a modern computer at all. I don't know if the guy who did it is even alive anymore. He was a friend of Eddie Anderson's, and I can check with Eddie if you want to see.
The sports thing is interesting, because I was thinking about, have any sports teams employed astrologers? That could help with draft picks or who to play on it Sunday, and like the chariot thing.
That comes closer to event charts and horary charts. One of the astrologers in town and I used to do that with Wisconsin football games. And Wisconsin played Nebraska, and this is in the days when Wisconsin was terrible and when Nebraska was great. And Uranus was in the first house, and I said, upset. And it was an upset. We did upset Nebraska, and the ruler of the ascendant had a very bad aspect. And I said, somebody's quarterback gets hurt. And that's exactly what happened. That's probably, I think, the reason why they won that game. But that goes back, way back into the 80s. And that guy doesn't even talk to me anymore because I walked out on him in a conversation for interrupting somebody else. I walked out, and he hasn't talked to me since then.
You defined dispositor, but what was the definition of dispositor?
Dispositor is the planet that gives the disposition to the planet. It rules the sign of another planet. Like in this horoscope, the sun is in Sagittarius, and the ruler of Sagittarius then gives its disposition, and that means Jupiter is the dispositor of the sun. The depositor, and this Woody Allen that is in. In Margaret Thatcher, the sun is in Libra, and so Venus is the dispositor, but it also rules the cusp of the house that the sun is in, so the Venus is both the dispositor and the depositor of the sun. But if you take the moon is in Leo, and so the dispositor of the moon is the sun, and the depositor of the moon is the moon because Cancer is on the cusp. We even gave it a few points for that. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Ela says,